We finished early today. Actually, it's not that early now. It's when we should have finished. But for the last half an hour, we've been faffing about because a restriction order has been put in place because of something that was said by Geoff Craft. I am joined with Rob Evans from The Guardian. What do you think of this morning's proceedings then, Rob? I mean, like the restriction order, I guess, but like just in general.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Geoff Craft is that if you look at him, he's a typical Securocrat, isn't he? I mean, he has lived his life working for Special Branch and, you know, working with MI5. When we read about all these sort of vast files being, compiled on people, on political activists, what you see, that's very systemic. That's industrial scale recording of files, and they are done by people like Geoff Craft, and he has spent his life doing that. And I think what's interesting is that if you talk to him, you would say, well, why are you doing that? But he would believe. I would suspect he would believe wholeheartedly in the idea of, there being lots of subversives around and, Reds under the bed. I mean, he is the chief person, he's one of the key people who, during, the sort of 70s and 80s, he went around looking for Reds under the bed.
Well, I mean, he said right at the beginning that when asked if he thought that the public would support the work of the SDS, he said, well, of course, because we were protecting their freedom.
Yes, yeah, I mean, he is...
And he seemed genuine, he actually thought that,
Yeah, it's an ideology, though, isn't it? They have a political view, and, we've all sat through a lot of the inquiry, and I think one thing that is interesting about the inquiry, and we shouldn't lose sight of, is that for a lot of these people involved in these undercover operations, they would have never thought when they were doing it that they would have ever had to have come out and explain to the public what was going on. And, for example, I always think about the men who deceived the women who did it, because it was going on. I mean, part of the reason that they could do it was that they were in a secret operation, and they never thought that they would have to come out, that it would come out into the open, that they would be exposed. And, you've seen the inquiry had to, last year they questioned Vince Miller. And, Vince Miller, when he was deceiving Madeleine, would never have thought that it would all come out. And I think that's the interesting thing, is that the likes of Geoff Craft and all the other managers who have come out, who have been questioned this year, in this round. I mean, they do not like the sunlight, and they do not like having to explain to the public what they were doing, because they were creatures of secrecy, and they're creatures who inhabit the darkness, don't they? Really. So I think that partly explains why they're so often. Well, I mean, a lot of them are not very forthcoming in what happened, and you have a lot of monosyllabic answers, and basically, within those managers, the predominant feeling would, I suspect, be, we have to answer these questions, but not willingly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we really saw that when Geoff Craft was asked about the stealing of dead children's identities.
Yes. And
he was, in hindsight, there was a lot in hindsight, yes, it's clear, but at the time it wasn't. But, he was quite like, it's very sad that the families found out. They never should have found out.
Yes.
And it was almost the regret was the finding out, not that it happened,
Yeah, I mean, they would have, obviously, a lot of the abuses that we now know about have occurred because of the secrecy, and that they never thought they would be found out. And, yes, I suppose you do. I mean, Geoffrey Craft is a classic comment, isn't it? That yes, in hindsight, that was a bit distasteful, but at the time, he wouldn't have thought about it. And I mean, it's quite interesting at the beginning of I think that David Barr, the inquiry's barristers, have a sort of set of questions. But at the beginning, I think he has a set of questions which sort of ask, what thought did you give to the legality or the sort of rules? And, I think at the time they didn't really think about it because they were all indoctrinated into a system, weren't they?
Yeah.
I mean, they were faithfully carrying out what they thought they were asked to do. And we're required to do. The one thing I do find interesting, though, is always when people, break out of that. And there's only one officer who I think has really publicly, in the inquiry, sort of seemed to show questioning about what he was doing, and who has sort
Graham
of
Coates.
Yeah, Graham Coates, I think, was the most interesting person. And he is the one person who has, of all the officers at the inquiry, who has shown most, who's been most questioning, really, of what he was doing and prepared to say it.
Yeah.
I think Roy Creamer, he was quite. Roy Creamer was another of all of the managers, was quite an interesting character, and he did say, he would have shut down the SDS.
He did say that, but he did say that he would have shut them down. First he says after Vietnam, but then after Lewisham, because then they had the power to ban demonstrations. So it was he would have shut down the SDS and done something more almost more authoritarian.
Yes.
I found he was a lot more verbose than the other managers, but
yes,
but equally elusive, I thought.
Yes, you never. One thing that you don't get from the managers, I think, is frankness.
Yeah.
And two, genuine contrition.
Yeah.
I think the only person who has shown any type of what I would call genuine contrition, any type of it, I think, was Graham Coates. I think he did sort of think, this was wrong. But
but it was only really in terms of the sexual stuff, though. It wasn't anything else particularly. Yeah. And I do think that, so you're saying at the beginning when their first questions about the legality of entering a search and seizure, and they're like, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
Whereas then it's the sexual, it was drawn, Barr drew it very clearly to Graham Clark today. It was well, you think that was wrong, that you obviously you can't sleep on duty, but then when you were undercover, you were breaking into people's homes, searching, seizing things, but you hadn't thought about that. And it's almost one of those issues has been a big topical issue around this generally, and they've had time to think about it, and they've gone, I better say that was, I knew nothing about that. Whereas the breaking and entering stuff, it was shit, that was illegal, really.
Yeah, but it's a funny thing, isn't it? It's a sort of, you could. It goes to this whole heart of, when the state does something wrong, they can retrospectively say, oh no, that's not illegal.
Yeah.
So the state itself can authorise its own illegality, and you see that played out in a lot of issues. I think the most important, I would say the most important story that's come out this week has been, the most important story I've written this week. But I thought it was important to focus on it, was how all the managers giving evidence said they knew nothing about sexual relationships. To a man, they just said, don't know anything about it. And I thought that was important to put that out on the record, because in the face of all the evidence there is, they were prepared to deny that they knew anything about it. And even when you had very particular evidence, I'm thinking of HN34 who was withdrawn after he actually told his superiors that he was had in his words fallen in love with a woman, an activist. they deny that they knew anything about it. The officers deny that they knew anything about it. So, again, you see what the police in particular and people in authority do when they're essentially, found out. They just sort of say, "Oh, we don't know anything about it." And the question that goes to, obviously, is that doesn't really engender very much public confidence.
No, I've always said if you want to see a true expression of solidarity,
yes,
see how police react when one of their own is, caught out. They will close ranks.
Yeah, that is. I mean, you do see what you've seen there is a classic closing of ranks, and I don't find it very believable. I think the side question to that is what can the inquiry do about it if they wish to challenge it? But that's another issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has been noticeable the soft soap approach towards former undercover officers and their managers compared to the way in which the members of the public have been questioned, and like this, it's been quite hostile towards people who were spied on.
Yes,
in comparison,
I would have thought it was a deliberate. I mean, the barristers and the lawyers must have thought, how are we going to approach them?
Yeah,
and they have a very deliberate. They're not challenging. Basically, you don't. If you've been in a courtroom elsewhere, you see barristers really, playing rough with people, with witnesses, and you just don't see that here.
No, you really don't. Well,
I think the thing about the inquiry takes often a sort of approach of being like, we're all gentlemen here, and we all play by gentlemen's rules, and could you pass those documents over to us? And we're all gentlemen. I'm sure that you'll do that.
Yeah.
If that doesn't happen, they don't seem to have a plan B.
No, there isn't. And none whatsoever. I mean, apart from there's occasional sort of interruptions by Mitting where he wanted to know a little bit more particular things,
but always very polite.
Yes, of course. Yeah. Though not with members of the public generally.
No,
the politeness doesn't seem to extend.
No, I mean he was particularly abrasive with Philippa Kaufman, who was the barrister representing the women who were deceived.
Yeah. And it's been very problematic in lots of ways. We had the restriction order just before we broke, so we can't really talk about what that element was about. But it's interesting how it shows the value of attending in person at these inquiries. Yes. This is your first time down for this set of. I have followed the inquiry very closely.
I suppose I've gone back and going back in time. I've written a lot about this, going back in time. But I have followed the inquiry and I've followed virtually all of it. But I tend to do it at home because I just find it easier with the. You've got I've got my laptop there. It's quiet and you can see all the documents. So. But I did want to come down and see the inquiry and see what it was like, and to say hello to everyone, really.
It actually looks like an inquiry now, which it hasn't until this section.
I mean, I've been a reporter a long time. I actually like going to, courts, and, I like to see things, in front of you. So, yes, I think it is useful. It does feel like an inquiry, yes, that's right. So... it was interesting to see it.
Yeah. So we're back again this afternoon with more with Geoffrey Craft. Sorry, not Clark. I keep getting. I've probably tweeted today with Clark as a surname instead of Craft. Yeah. Shocking at that. You hoping to learn anything else out of him? Is there anything you wanted to be questioned on that he hasn't yet?
Are there any questions I want you to
ask?
No.
Is there any questions you want asked of Craft this afternoon?
Oh God, I mean, but the problem is that you could speak to Craft forever, but I mean, whether or not he would be
forthcoming.
I mean, in private he would say different things if he really. I mean, what would be interesting would be hearing him talk to all of his other former, special branch friends.
Yeah.
Then you have a very different picture.
Yeah. If anybody wants to bug any of the reunions they apparently have on a regular basis, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm not sure they happen anymore.
Probably not. Probably not. Or, yeah. Anyway, either way, Graham Coates probably isn't invited.
No.
Well, thanks for joining us on this. I'll be doing another reaction at the end. If you're around then, do you want to react again later, or maybe not?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, see how it goes.
Anyway.
Right, thanks for joining us. We'll be back again this afternoon. We'll follow on the audio on YouTube, and we'll give reactions on Twitter as it goes along. Cheers for joining.
Cheers.